Welcome to today's Software AG Government Solutions webcast titled DevOps for Natural Programmers. Today's webcast will be presented by Eric Wood, Principal Systems Engineer, and Patrick Gould, Chief IT Architect, both of Software AG Government Solutions. As we move through today's presentation, I invite you to submit any questions that you may have via the Q&A box, which is located in the top right corner of your webcast dashboard. We will address your questions at the end of today's program. In the event that we're not able to answer your question, your submission will be recorded, and today's presenters will be back in touch with you as soon as possible. Additionally, today's presentation is being recorded. This program recording will be made available to you in an email that will be sent to you later this evening. Additionally, this webcast recording will be posted to the Database and Natural playlist on the Software AG YouTube channel later today. With that, it is now my pleasure to welcome Eric Wood.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the DevOps for Natural Programmers webinar. You are speaking with Eric Wood, and Patrick Gould will be my assistant colleague that will actually be doing a demo for us today. So without further ado, let's get started with the presentation. Today we're going to be covering what is DevOps, talking about some of the DevOps phases, the DevOps tools, and actually getting a live demo of Natural One in the DevOps environment. So let's just get started with this little film strip here, little cartoon strip of Dilbert. And I'm sure a lot of you all have been in this situation before, where you're on a project and the requirements are always changing, and they're always asking you for the status. So I know sometimes you think this, but that you come up with a good excuse or good reason of why things haven't been moving along as fast as and as lean and as better as you planned. So with that said, leaner, faster, better. You know, digitalization is sweeping across our industry, creating an unparalleled demand for many companies, having them to innovate, want to be more experimental, as well as deliver capabilities faster. Now, this increase in speed and agility is just not a desire, it's really imperative for survival. So you'll need to adopt a more flexible and efficient approach to software development. And for that, we need to adopt DevOps culture. In a DevOps environment, your entire team is responsible for delivering both new features and stability. Instead of just creating code and throwing it over that proverbial wall to the operations team to implement, it is now the responsibility of the entire team, which is development team and the IT operations team, to implement these changes. So DevOps is the practice of development and IT operations working together in an entire software lifestyle, from development through the process to production. And by doing this, there are various tools that, and this is an organizational chain, and there are tools and processes that will be implemented with you guys, and together you're going to work to get results to implement DevOps. Let's take a look at some companies that have adopted the DevOps. And as you see, there are a few that I have listed, and probably this is outdated by now, but companies like Amazon and Google and Netflix, you see that they're big companies and they implement and deploy changes. Let's say at Amazon, 23,000 changes a day. That is incredible. Google, 5,500 a day. But I'm not asking you all to do that. So when you all are getting started with DevOps, don't try to boil the ocean with a complete enterprise-wide DevOps initiative. I suggest you identify a small pilot application, form yourself a cross-functional DevOps team that includes individuals from the development team, from the test team, as well as operations. and then create a initial development pipeline that addresses some of your process constraints. And then once you measure is the key for success. Measure your progress and your success, and like they say, wash, rinse, and repeat. Now, let me just mention another company, Etsy. Etsy, as you know, some of you may know, is a very successful e-commerce website. And if you are into crafty things, you may have either purchased from them or sold on Etsy. But prior to DevOps, they used the Agile model for making changes to their website. And if they needed to make changes to the website, they would need to make changes at least every 2 weeks or so. And it would take them about 4 hours just to do this manually. So you can imagine, with this loss of time, this could be revenue and also potential loss of customers going to other websites, especially if their website is down. So in order to make these changes, they had to bring their website down. So they thought, you know, we're going to create a tool that will allow us to implement some of these changes on a more automated feature. And by doing this, making this change, they are now implementing over 50 updates per day. So it's much faster than before. So that's something like an update every 26 minutes. So with DevOps, DevOps focuses on promoting collaboration, communication, and integration between the developers and the IT operations team. It seems its aim is to help departments produce faster software in a timely manner and with accuracy and with confidence, so that you can provide faster responsiveness to changes, improve the quality of your code, and to provide continuous delivery of code changes by using proven processes. Now, we see and we've heard from many customers that they are starting to deploy the DevOps practice across their development departments, with the exception of natural development environments. They're using tools that are new and modern, which are attracting new talent. And this leaves the natural application development team in silos. And they're often viewed as not being innovative, unable to attract new talent because of green screen technology. But you know what? These are not good reasons. And like number 45, this is fake news, right? As you all know, Software AG has announced that the green screen editor will be retiring, and you too can code in the Eclipse environment. This is something really cool and exciting for us at Software AG, and you should be excited about it too as our customers, as we're moving forward, continue with our theme of Database and Natural 2050. So by using Natural One as the de facto development environment, you're running under Eclipse. And you can still use the same natural skills as before, but utilizing the features and functions of Eclipse, making yourself more productive and more efficient, more marketable, as well as more modern, and it's starting to attract more of the younger individuals that are learning Eclipse in the universities today. So let's take a look at how Natural One fits very well within the DevOps ecosystem and tool chain. Now, you'll see, I call this the life cycle, or the circle of life cycle, where there are some tools that are available there, but these are not all the tools that fit into the DevOps life cycle. There are a plethora of tools, and we'll look at some of the tools later on within the presentation. But the beauty of a lot of these tools are that the majority of them are open source products. And if you are in an environment where they've already started using DevOps, then you can use the existing tools that is within your organization today. So let's take a look at the first change management. So, gone are the days of spreadsheets with timelines on them with various colors, having meetings after meetings, just discussing what is the status of a project. Well, there are tools out there that are such as Redmine and Jira that are available for you to implement within your DevOps environment. As long as you have the proper plugins in your Eclipse environment, you can use one tool to document all types of changes by associating it with a task and assigning them to developers. Assigning new features, when to add new features, how to correct faults, restructuring your code for future changes. And now, as a project manager, you can see the overall process of the project and when the tasks are completed, who worked on them, how often these changes had taken place, and so forth. So now you can sit back and you don't have to worry about meetings and time and pulling developers off of the project. You can look at this online and see when these changes have been incorporated within the application. The next step is looking at repository-based team development. This is a crucial step in introducing Natural One into the new development process with tools like Get, for example, and the SVN. So before I get into that, let's look at the architecture here. In the bottom part of your screen there, where I said have the development server, this is where you have your base natural code and all of your natural system files, your fuser, fnet, and so forth. And sitting on top of Natural, there's a piece of software called the Natural Development Server. This is your hook into how you test as well as monitor your code as well as use the code for development. The box to the left is in your development workstation. This is where you implement Natural One as well as potentially a local repository for source code management. And the top box will be the central repository server. That's where all the code will reside, and that is for all development, for all developers. So for the first step, what we will do is get connectivity to Natural One and your base code. So the first step in this, and I don't want to steal Patrick's thunder because I know he's going to do this in the demo, but the first step is to build a project. So you take your code from your development server and you actually implement and import this into Natural One. Once you import this into Natural One, you'll create a project and associate this project with your source code management tool. Once you've done that, then you will push and commit the code to the central repository. Once you commit that code to the central repository, your fuser is no longer the single source of truth. Now the central repository is the single source of truth. So every developer will pull that code and from this point will create their own copy and modify it in an isolated area to implement all of the new features and functions of what has been assigned to them. Now, once they have done all of the modifications, then they will upload this and commit this back to the central repository once they've finished all their modifications. But before they do that, they will build and run that code through Natural One through the base code, and then store them in a private library. So any of those changes that they make will not clobber anyone else if they're working on the same module. Then once they're satisfied with those changes, then they will push it to the central repository, and then once the central repository has it, all of the developers will have access to that code. Now, with the use of that tool, it will allow you to monitor all of the modifications and track all the changes that have been made, as well as if there are any conflicts, it will allow you to help resolve them using some of the merge capabilities within the repository. And at any time, you can always back out and restore from previous versions. The next step is continuous integration. And with continuous integration, this is a coding philosophy. And it's a set of practices that drive development teams to implement small changes in small increment changes and check in code to the version control repository frequently. So this is the whole benefit of DevOps. You're doing small changes and frequent intervals, so that you're not having massive changes and it's affecting a lot of things. You're doing it in small portions, and that's the whole beauty of DevOps. Now, because most modern applications require development code in different platforms and tools, the team needs mechanisms to integrate them and validate these changes. So there are tools such as Jenkins and SOAP UI. So Jenkins is a tool used for building, testing, and deploying software applications in an automatic process. But you may use other tools as well, again, based on the type of application that you have and what mechanisms you need to test within your application. So each time you commit changes to the repository, you can have Jenkins invoke the process to build your code, test your changes using test scripts and data that you have built and verified. And if there are errors, the developer will be notified instantly that something has failed within the test of the new changes. And if the test is successful, Jenkins will deploy the code to your development environment or to whatever your next environment that you use for testing, for further testing of the application. Now, if you're going to fail, you want to fail early. So this is the beauty of DevOps and continuous integration, because it will detect the problems before it goes into production or somewhere else where it will interfere with the rest of the application. And again, within Natural One has application testing components where you can test your sub-programs and business services directly, create unit tests for sub-programs and business services, allowing teams to detect problems early. And the next step within continuous integration is continuous delivery, whereas within continuous delivery picks up from where continuous integration ends. So what this is, it's an automatic way to deliver your application to selective infrastructure environments. And again, most teams work with multiple environments other than their production environments, such as development, unit tests, and sandboxes, whatever you will call it within your organization. And continuous delivery ensures there is an automatic way to push those changes out to them. Now, remember, continuous delivery doesn't mean every change is deployed to production, immediately. It may mean every change has been proven and is ready to be deployed at any time. But you're not saying that I'm going to put it in production right away, because your environment might not be set up that way. And the last step in this is continuous deployment. And continuous deployment is the next step past continuous delivery. So once you are confident that all of your steps within building the code, testing the code, have been completed, then you can have it set up that it can automatically be deployed into production. And once your team is confident, then you'll start letting continuous deployment put things into production, unless you have a couple where you have constraints by regulatory or other requirements where you have it set in another environment, and then you use your existing tools like PAC or N2O to actually move that code. So once everything has been built and integrated and as well as delivered, then you want to start monitoring the tool and monitoring the process. And again, once early in the webinar, I said monitoring is a key to success. So you want to monitor any specific issues from specific releases, making sure that it's not any impact on your users or on your environment, and you want to keep track. So if there is something that you can back out of those situations and correct the problem and then re-implement as well. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a plethora of tools out there. So if your organization is already into the DevOps environment and you can use the tools that are out there, but you see here, there are many tools for collaboration, many tools for building, test, deployment, and run. So you use the tools that you have within your environment or what is applicable to the type of application that you're trying to implement. Now, with that said, it's time to see this in action. And so we're going to, in a short minute, I'm going to turn this over to Patrick. But as you know, Patrick and I and the rest of my team, Becky and Bob and Alex, we travel a lot together. So Patrick was with me in the DC area. I'm working with a customer doing a health check. You know, those health checks that you all always love to do. And we were in DC. And in Washington, D.C., down the street from this customer, there was a barbershop called Mr. Natural, Afro Style Shop. Now, as you all know, Patrick has always been nicknamed Mr. Natural. So I said, Patrick, you got to go there. So I said, well, Patrick, if this was yours, who would be your first customer? Who would be one of your customers as Mr. Natural? And the only person we could think of at the time was, guess who? Good old Bob Ross. So, so that's one of Patrick's customers. And with that said, it's time for a live demo. But before I go into the demo, I think, Patrick, you want me to switch over to one of your slides, and I will turn it over to you, Patrick.
Good day, everybody. Will, can you put that slide back up there? Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to be giving, this is Patrick. I think most of you know me. I've been around a long time. I've done quite a few of these demos, but today's demo is a simple, basic DevOps demo. What I'm going to be doing is taking a library on the mainframe, adding it to my local project within Natural One. I'm going to then share that project with a repository. So one of the pretenses here is I have already installed a version repository on my laptop, and I am using SVN in this case. And that will allow me to commit, update, head, create some deployment XML that I can then move my changed code from my version repository back into the actual development F user. The caveat here is I'm going to show you how to use private libraries. So what that does is allows multiple people to be able to work on the same piece of code at the same time. And what the private library does is it inserts a private library before your library in the step-lib change. So any programs that you change don't get compiled into the actual F user. It gets compiled into a temporary F user that you are just using. So then on the mainframe, I have Natural 9 up and running. We have a Natural 9 NDV server up and running. And that's the code that I'm going to be using in this particular scenario today. So with that done, I'm going to point back to my actual Natural One environment, and I'm going to walk you through how you would take a natural library and populate this into a version repository. So first thing first, you can see up front here, I have an SVN repository already running in the right-hand corner. You can see I have my SVN. And right now, I am in the Natural One perspective. Down over here is my Natural development server. So the first step that I would do in this case is I would right-click on the project, the natural library that I want to move up into my local workspace.
Patrick?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Are you doing you need to share your screen at this point if you've moved into the demo environment. Top left corner, go to share my screen. There you go. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, people, I apologize for that. So just going back, what I was just going to show you was that I have an SVN repository up and running over here. and I will show you the code inside there a little later. I'm going to take you through the steps that you would go through to actually get the code into the SVN repository, how to move it around the repository, and then how to get it back into your Natural F user. So this is my Natural 1 perspective. In the left-hand corner here, I have my actual Natural library sitting on my mainframe F user. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to right-click on the library, and what I would do here is I'd be adding it to a new project. I have already done this, so I'm just showing you the steps that you would take. You can see it would be called SAG PG1. I can change that to anything of my liking. I'm going to cancel out of that because I already have that library up over here. I did this before 100 times just to make sure the demo guards were with me and to make sure that everything worked. Now you can already see that this project is part of an SVN repository because it has a whole lot of versions to this code over here. But one of the first steps that I would have done to populate or make the project aware of the SVN repository is I would have right-clicked on this project, and on over here under Team, I would have had the ability to share my project. I have already done that, so you can see that my context menu has already changed to show me all the context pieces that I can do to a piece of code with the versioning tool. The second step I would want to have done was create a private library so that I can work on a piece of code and Eric can work on the same piece of code, etc. And the way I would have done that is I would have gone down to the library level, I would have right-clicked, I would have gone to Properties, I would have gone to Natural, Security, Step Libs, and you can see I am in a development mode called Private. So once I've chosen Private, there's two options, Shared or Private. I did Private, I would apply and close. I would have got out of that, and then just to show you what it works, you can see down over here in my actual F user, I have a library called SAG PG001. So this in essence is my private library. So the way that would work is I now have my program in the versioning repository, and now I want to make a change to it. So all I have to do is drag it into the editor workspace over here. And you can see I've been running this comment line over here. This is a really, really complex Natural program. Took me a couple of days to write. A little humor there, very simple little program. But I have a comment line in here that I would like to change. So I'm going to change this comment line and call it number 9. So if I wanted to save this program to the versioning repository, now the first thing I would do is actually just save the code. Automatically Natural 1 puts its little markers to tell me that this particular program is not the same as the one in the F user anymore, and that I should compile this program. Now, but when I compile this program, you've got to understand I'm compiling it to my private library. It does not affect the actual F user library that other people may be working on at the same time. So in order to compile this code, I just go down to Natural 1 and I say build this project. Then you should see the little markings will disappear over here eventually, and it will be compiled. Now, you can actually see what I do while I work. I keep the console running down the bottom, and you can see all the traffic that is going between my desktop and the NDV server. So everything that's happening, good way to debug in case you're not seeing the things you're meant to be seeing. You can actually see what the step libs are, etc., etc. I can see the actual mainframe port number, profile, what I'm using, all in my little log over here. One day when I'm very comfortable and everything is working beautifully, I'll probably switch that off, but for now I like to keep it there so I can debug something if that was needed. Okay, so now this particular program has not been checked back into the version control, right? So the way I would do that is I would right-click it and I would go to my team context menu and I would say commit this program. And here I'm forced to give a comment. So this is one of the values of using a versioning repository. It's going to force you to put in a description. I mean, that's up to you if you just want to use ABC. It's not going to help anybody, so you probably want to put something in here that means something. And then I can say OK. So this, you right away see that my actual version changed from 15 to 16. So I now have 16 versions of this particular program in my version control system. The next step is I want to actually commit this to the head level of SVN. So again, I'll go to Team, and I will go to Update to Head. If I went across now to my SVN repository, let me just make for sure my firewall is disabled. It is disabled. And if I open up the SVN repository and do a refresh on here, we should see that this too has version 16 as its version. So the only thing that is different now is this particular program version and the one on the F user in the library SAG PG01. That is because I was using private libraries. So how would I get that into my private library? And that's what I'm going to show you now. I mean, into my formal F user file. So I'm going to go back to the natural one perspective. And just to prove to you that that is actually correct, if I can right click on this program, I can go and say compare with base library on server. I can even compare it to my private library on the server. But right now, those two are actually the same because I did compile that program. But this one should come back and tell me that the one on the F user is still version 8, and the one on the local workspace is comment number 9. So this goes into the whole concept of DevOps and how Natural One integrates into DevOps. I can close that window out. So what we have now is the ability to build an Ant script that will take the code that I want to move into the F user, and I build a script. The purposes of this demo today, I'm going to be running the script internally inside of Eclipse, but the concept here is you would take this little deploy XML file that's down over here, and that's what would actually get moved to a tool like Jenkins. And that's where Jenkins can start doing your continuous deployment for me. But I could now build this actual file. I go across here to New. I go, not that one. Go to File, New, go to Other, and I'm going to go to deploy a natural Ant file. Now you can see it's already got my deployment XML file in over here. So the reason that would be there is because I can maybe want to use one as a dummy to create others. This one is particularly moving code from my SVN repository into my development F user. But maybe my next step is I actually want to use a script to move it into my test F user. Or maybe I'm going to make use of my N2O or my predict pack to do that. That's my choice. All I'm doing right now is making sure that the code has been moved into the development F user. So this is a wizard. I'm telling it what to do, and I can have separate wizards for separate environments. And I can walk through this particular script, and it's going to tell me what do I want to compile. I have all these controls about myself. It's going to tell me where my SVN repository is, because it's actually pulling the code out of the SVN repository. And what is the version I want it to be at? I want to pull the head version of SVN across to my F user. Next, this is where do I want it to go to? I want it to go to the mainframe, to where my NDV server is running, and these are my particular credentials, my user ID and password for national security, etc. Next, if I have any in reference projects, I could add them over here. This is the ability to have a couple of libraries in a single reference project, sometimes for certain types of development scenarios that would make sense, not for me right now. If it's a secured environment, I'm going to add my extra security stuff over here. Eventually, it's my mappings, and eventually I'm done. Do I want a log file? Do I actually want to create a sys.obh unload work plan that I could actually run maybe in my JCL if that's what I wanted to do? So I have all these options available to me. And then, of course, I would have hit finish, and I would have had my file, which is now already sitting in the deploy.xml file. So for me to be able to run this deploy XML file, all I have to do is right-click on it, and I'm going to say run as an ant build. And what that will do, if I open up my little console window a little bit for you, you're going to be able to see what's happening in the background here. It's logging onto the mainframe. It's moving all my code up from the versioning tool into my fuser, and it's actually executing a stow. And you can see down there that everything was successful. The build was successful. So at this point in time, all my code should be at the same level. And I really hope that is true. To check that, I could close this one, and I could open up this object over here on my fuser. Can edit the program. I'm going to pull it into my editor area, and you can see I'm up to GS comment number 9. So at this point in time, I have successfully created a local project with my library. I have populated SVN. I have made a private library on my fuser. I have made a change to a piece of code. I've compiled that piece of code. I've then committed it to the versioning repository. And after that, I have moved it back to the fuser. So at that stage, we can go back to Eric, who I think is going to do a summary for us quick. And then I believe it's a Q&A.
Okay. Can you open my screen okay?
Yes, you just need to advance to the summary screen,
sure.
Please.
All right. Nope, that's next. So, for summary, everyone, I hope you all can understand how easy it is to implement DevOps within your natural environment using Eclipse. So our summary is this. We learned what DevOps is. It's the practice of development and IT operations, working together in an entire software lifecycle from development through production. We've learned that Natural One and how it fits in very well with the Eclipse, and how there are various tools that will make us very successful, very productive, as well as, I don't want to say hip and happening, but, you know, more modern, start doing our development of our natural code. And, you know, it might take some of the little millennials start looking over our shoulder, want to see what we're doing, because natural is a lot more exciting to code than some of those other languages. And then this has also been learned how Natural One fits into the DevOps ecosystem using the various phases and the various tools within DevOps. As well, we learned that there are a plethora of tools that are available for us to use, even if, as well as the tools that may already exist into our current ecosystem within our organizations. And last but not least, is Mr. Natural again. Here we are, we're in Austin, Texas. And now he has his own parking space. Can you believe this? I'm like, this is enough. Enough of Patrick. So Patrick is now holding up the sign saying, now that you're using DevOps and Natural One, it'll be easy to find the new talent. Just come talk to him. He'll show you there's easy ways to get new talent in and keep those applications and make them more agile, make them more innovative, as well as allow you to develop them in a more expeditious manner. So with that said, we're open for questions.
Okay, thanks to both of you. This has been a very fun presentation so far. So I've got a couple of questions I want to start off with, but I'm also going to invite everybody who may still have some questions lingering, and if you'd like to present them to us, please submit them now. The Q&A box is the top right corner. You can submit them there or in the chat box, and we'll get to it. So, gentlemen, the first question I have is, as follows. What is the need for DevOps?
Okay, I can answer that one. There's probably lots and lots of good reasons to use DevOps, but I think at a high level, the reason for using a DevOps environment is to help increase deployment frequency, that you can get fixes that are needed into production in a more timely manner instead of trying to build them into big blocks that you do all at one time, and then a lot can go wrong, because the concept that you can back out these and you can just move a few through makes it easier. And that will push to lower failure rates of new releases. It should also reduce the time between fixes. And of course, we can recover faster when something goes wrong because there's not that much more to pull back. So at a high level, Will, I would say that's probably the main need for DevOps, if Eric wants to chime in something there as well.
No, that's you took the words out of my mouth, Patrick.
Okay, I'm going to then go to the next one, and I'm going to ask you guys to help me because I'm not sure that the question came in as clear as it needs to be. The questioner said as follows: I saw you did the stow command. I thought you cannot use editor functions when goes to the host, including save. Please clarify. Does that question?
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand that when you're working in the local area, you're going to be using the concept of different building mechanisms. So we don't say compile, we will say build the project. But remember, what's happening is it's actually working back up against your F user. So when it actually logs onto the F user, it's going to be a stow command, because a natural F user does not understand a build command. So that should be that,
okay.
that little console down the bottom there. I was just trying to emphasize what is actually happening behind the scenes. If you worked in the server mode, but that is not the preferred mode for working, you can do a stow, but that's not going to give you anything more. The concept is to make sure you work in a local project mode when you're working with Natural One.
Okay. The next one I have for you both is as follows. Can we use any open source tools in DevOps, or does it require SAG tools?
No, as I mentioned earlier, that whole list of open source tools that are there available, you can use any one of them. That we're not holding you down to use any software G tools for development at this point in time. That's the beauty of using DevOps, because you can use whatever tools that are out there as well as the open source tools.
Okay. The next question I have for you both is as follows. What are the benefits of using version control?
I would say the greatest advantage of using a version control system is the ability to have many members working on the same piece of code at the same time and not affecting each other, and have somebody resolve the conflicts at the point in time that that code itself needs to go into production, because the same piece of code that is being worked on might need to go into production for a certain user after a week, and for another team it might only need to go into production after another month. So it's a concept of being able to do that without affecting the other people's testing of their code. The other ability is that we have so many versions, we never have to worry about losing a piece of code. And what we can also do is then start using the compare tools to compare what's different between this one and, say, another one. And it's the same concept that is used when the merging takes place to get the code into the versioning repository.
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. I was typing up our next question, which is seemingly 2 to 3 questions within itself. So I'm going to pose to you what I think they are sequentially. The first, then, part of this question is, how do you run menu-driven testing on the mainframe? After the code was checked into the fuser? Does that first question make logical sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's the first part of the question. Then the next part is, how do you use the debugger before or after check-in stow? Can debugger work through the application menu, that is, for example, navigate choosing a customer?
Mm-hmm.
That's the entirety of the questions that were submitted.
Okay. So there are other tools or many tools that allow screen testing. If you have some of your own, you would probably want to deploy them into the continuous integration. But Software AG has a screen tester tool which can be used in the flow. So that would be something that that particular person who asked the question could have a look at. So once you've moved that code into the next environment after development, you could then, through the continuous deployment, kick off these tests with preset values as to what you're trying to test in the actual programs themselves. The debugger would be probably done while you're just in development and you're busy coding and you just want to test the program to see that it's actually doing what you, the developer, want it to do. Not so much all the syntax checking or every possibility. That would be more the screen testing job. But the debugger allows you to step through your code moving it back, say, into the version control system. You're just making sure your piece of code, the changes that you have been asked to make, are correct. So that's really just a natural one feature.
Okay, very good. Next question I have. When uploading changes, is it line by line, or module by module, or character by character merging, or is it that dependent on your source control software? Does this software support all of the above?
It's a tricky question.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the code that's moving, say, from the version repository back into the fuser, that is going to be at the module level, and it's using sysobjh to actually move that code up there. The actual moving, when we commit something to the version repository, I would presume it's just a directory copy of one object, say, in the version repository up into the head trunk or whatever. At that stage, it's not doing compares. The comparing is more when it does a merging. So the merging facility would take what's in the already in the repository as the main version and start comparing it to what's coming in, or if there's two other, maybe three programs coming in at the same time, there would be the merging software that's helping you make sure that the correct object gets moved in. And that is going to become somebody's job. Somebody who's always going to be in charge of who manages to get the correct piece of code into production. There's a whole, into development, say, for the first time. There's a lot of tools that help you, and that's what all the versioning tools do, but it still requires sometimes some manual work to make sure you're doing it eyeballing, yeah.
Okay, the next one I have is as follows. Are the other developers notified when the code has been migrated from the repository server to the fuser?
You know that one, Eric?
Well, they could be. It all depends on the steps that you put into your build tool. There are mechanisms, like especially within Jenkins, where you can set up a to start passing your emails or messages, SMS message or whatever type of message you want to use, to indicate and let them know that something has been moved into the next environment. So yeah, they can be notified.
Okay. The next question that I have is as follows. How do people do production support when using Natural One? Previously, they only needed to copy the program into a production support library and remove all the updated statement. This helped them to debug with Natural One. Is there a suggestion to do the support?
There's a couple of ways. If you've allowed and given people particular permission to work in a production environment, Natural One will still have the single line editor available. So if it's generally going to be a one-line change and you're just trying to see some data maybe and the programs have already been written, it might be a quick one-line editor to change the value you want to look at to make sure. Or you could also have a natural development server running against production, which would allow a person to log on to production via the natural development server, create a program, and run it. But there goes the risks of if you allow that or you don't allow that as a customer or as a company.
Okay. The next one I have is as follows. It appears you no longer use PAC or N2O to migrate code. Is that right?
That is not true.
Right.
You can keep using PAC and N2O. All we demonstrated today was the ability to get the program into a versioning repository, have private libraries, which you don't have to, but it's a very nice feature, and then move that program back into the development F user. From that point in time, you can take PAC to migrate that code in the existing paths you have today, or N2O, or any manual mechanism you're using today.
Correct.
But for people that don't have an official version migration control system, this is the perfect place to start and use the tools that are available from Software AG to do that for you.
Okay. The next and what will be the final question we have is as follows. How and where do we set up the repository? Is there a separate repository for each user team?
That's Eric's.
You can set this up in multiple ways. You can have it one big central repository where you assign users to get onto that repository, and then you can then have them have their own local repository. So it all depends on how you want to configure your central repository and your repository source code management tools.
That is true.
Okay, I am going against my word. I'm just trying to see what this last question is, though I want to pose you one last one, gents. It is finally as follows. Once Natural version 9 is installed into production, can production support use the mainframe editor or only the single line editor?
Single line editor. But the only thing they can't do is edit. So production control, anything that they could execute before that doesn't require something to be edited, they can just run as normal. But just the mainframe editor, the DDM editor, and another edit would have been disabled in 9. But doing stuff like predict or sysaos is just the same. You just type in sysaos and you'll go into sysaos from the green screen. And if you do need to make a program, or if you need to write a quick and dirty program, and you have the permission to do that, you would use the single line editor, or you would put a natural development server up in production.
Okay. With that, we don't have any additional questions. We did thankfully get a lot of questions, so to anybody who didn't have their question answered, I'm fairly certain we got everything answered, with perhaps the exception of one last thing that came in earlier on. These questions have all been recorded. They will be sent to Eric and Patrick, and I will let them know which ones they need to be back in touch with you on. So, gentlemen, with that, thank you very much for your time and for a very informative and fun presentation today. Our program has now ended. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.